Welcome back, my single solitary viewer, to Flouze babbles incoherently while on the Cubic Cauldron server. Good building lair. I actually like the addition of leaf blocks over there. I'm on the Cubic Cauldron SMP, and I'm I'm not actually making a Cubic Cauldron video. Again, it's a Flouze Talks video, and this time I'd like to talk about the basics, the absolute basics of everything. Knowing things. How do we know things? And by this, I don't mean discussing the philosophical subject of epistemology. That's something rather big. What this is actually, and it's actually a fascinating subject. It's basically the science or the study of how we know things, how do we believe things, what is truth, what does truth even mean? So that includes the various theories of truth. And the theories of knowledge, etc. Like, what does knowledge mean? What does it entail? All that kind of stuff. Fascinating stuff. And the other thing I do not mean is how do we know things for certain? That was the quest René Descartes entered into, and basically he found out that it all boils down to one last thing. Je pense donc je suis, aka I think therefore I am, and that was the only thing he could actually be certain of. Everything else he couldn't be certain. He couldn't be certain that the world was real. You can't actually be certain of that, and no one's able to actually be certain of that. That's called the problem of hard solipsism. No one has ever solved it. If you can, good on you. You've revolutionized philosophy. Or, for example, if you like other philosophical brain scratchers, you could try Hume's problem of induction. How do you justify the use of induction without using induction? Good luck. It's just like how do you justify the use of your memory without using your memory? How do you test the reliability of your memory without using your memory? It's impossible. That's why these problems have never, ever been solved. But that's philosophy, and that's not what we're doing right now. I want to talk about, like, how we know things. How could we know certain things? Because what happens is that we're going to be browsing the internet. We're going to be going to school. We're going to be told a lot of things by friends, by family, by pastors, by teachers, by all sorts of things or sites that we visit or YouTube videos like this one, aka don't believe every word I say as gospel. Take it all with a grain of salt is what I'm saying, even what I'm telling you right now. To have a concrete example, not so long ago, Tommy retweeted something, like Tommy as in Tommy the SX, the seal-loving bastard. He retweeted something that alluded... Like, it was just a tweet account. Tells you, like, some random factoid that you'd think, yeah, it's surprising. So basically, that tweet said, a study shows that impolite people are less likely to betray you than polite people. And so, since Tommy isn't the most polite fella, I imagine, he figured, a study shows that impolite people are more trustworthy. And intrigued, well, I had to research this, so I did. And basically, I found the newspapers in which this was reported, and they also provided me with the article. Not the article, but I mean the research. The actual peer-reviewed research that social scientists, in this case, had made to come to this conclusion. And what I discovered is that the research was misrepresented in the news article. So basically, that really happens very, very often. Either journalists don't quite understand what a study is talking about, or an editor comes in and like basically makes a more clickbaity headline, a more sensational headline that is going to draw the eyes, but actually doesn't reflect the truth of the research. So there's always a lot of reasons why like an error is made. But in this case, it was probably a journalist that was a little bit too lazy to read the entire study because, that takes a lot of work, and not everyone is paid like huge amounts of money these days. So basically, the study didn't actually say that polite people are more likely to betray you. The study actually pitted players of a game in a game where the aim is to betray someone, like imagine Survivor, for example, or actually a perfect example that would be equivalent. Imagine it's a UHC Moles game between strangers. None of the players know each other. All right, so basically everyone's kind of polite to each other, but friendly, but whatever. But what that study found was that once a player is getting ready to betray another player, they start being a lot more polite to them. They start being a lot friendlier. They're buttering them up to prepare for the betrayal. So that's what the study found out. It found out that in the context of a Moles game, if a player suddenly becomes friendlier to you and more polite to you, they're actually potentially about to betray you right then and there. So that's what the study found out. And instead, it was misreported that basically impolite people are more trustworthy, which is not the case. They're not more or less trustworthy than polite people. There's no relation, actually. So that was an example. Whew, I've been a little bit long-winded, but I just wanted to say I just wanted to give you that kind of example in real life, for example, and this one was a recent experience of something that turned out to actually not be true. And how do we know this? How do we find this out? Because usually we're sort of humans, we're built in to be sponges most of the time. Now we come to the nitty-gritty and we start like thinking about, well, how do we know things? Like, one of the best ways to figure out how we actually make mistakes in learning things or knowing things is to find out, like, how we do it. And one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, but the main method that we end up learning things isn't like through rationality and close examination of all the facts. We actually get told stuff by someone we trust. And because we trust them, we believe them. Most of our beliefs, the things we end up knowing, are transmitted to us that way. And you don't have to look any farther than your parents. Your parents taught you a huge amount of information and things that are completely accurate, such as don't touch the oven when it's hot because it burns. And they're quite right about that one. They never lied to you. That was completely true. And so many other lessons, like the words they taught you. They taught you the words you know, for the most part, quite accurately. And you ended up knowing what the words mean, and now you can converse in English with other people thanks to the knowledge that was imparted to you by your parents about all sorts of things. Especially, they're a trusted source because obviously they have your own success at heart. They want you to succeed as much as possible. So they're going to sincerely try to give you the best knowledge they know and try to pass it on to you. However, they're wrong about some of the things. So almost everything our parents tell us is true, but sometimes they actually get things wrong. And not because they want to dupe you or lie to you, but actually because they ended up sincerely believing that this thing they repeated to you was true. But every other thing we learn much in the same way. We go to school, and we start learning things in school from trusted sources, teachers. We trust the teachers to teach us some things that are going to be true. We go, for example, believers will go to church, and they'll trust their pastors or their priests or their imams or rabbis, whatever, that they're experts in their field, and they'll tell them things that are true. We just assume, basically, that what we're being told is true, because that's what these people are supposed to do. And that's how you come to have friends as trusted sources of information as well. Like, these friends have built up over time an impressive track record of being honest with you. That's why they're still your friends. And so basically when they tell you something, you figure, hey, this is most likely true because my friend has a reliable habit of telling me the truth. That's why I believe him. But hey, everyone's a little bit wrong, and sometimes we share things that we think are correct, but actually it turns out in hindsight that it's not. And that's because of that way that we end up getting most of our beliefs, most of our knowledge. We just hear it and basically believe it part and parcel, and like all of it. We just hook, line, and sinker. We actually buy all of it. And so, in short, we get stories from the media, websites that we trust, etc., and sometimes they're wrong. There are sometimes there are sites that are reliably wrong, like Conservapedia, for example, is reliably wrong. What else? Evolutionnews.org is actually a really insidious one. It's a site that's pretending to be legitimate science, but it's actually creationist misinformation, basically trying to discredit the theory of evolution. always trying to discredit the theory of evolution. Why? Who knows? I mean, you can like most. I don't know why they try so hard, because most people who accept the theory of evolution and realize the validity of it, they're Christians. You don't anyway. I don't. That's not what the video is about. It's just about knowing. But like, otherwise, most people are trying to tell you the truth, and they think they're telling you something that's actually true, but it may not be. And the reason I'm making this video on knowledge is because, like, how do we know things? Is because it's the basis of everything. So, wow, what happened here? Wow. Whoa, this is not cool. I better disconnect. That weird server crash threw me for a loop. I'm here on a single player where I was testing some things. So nothing to worry about. It's just testing. Only testing things. No problem. Nothing to worry about. How do we know things? Here's two other quick examples.
Well, let me explain it this way. Let's use our biblical glasses. We're going to put on our biblical glasses, okay, like we talked about in other lectures. We're going to look at the world through our biblical glasses.
I learned to see through a sociological lens and understand the world as it really exists, as a series of intersecting social systems. Once you have a systemic and institutional framework, you see how oppression manifests in many subtle ways under the systems of what Bell Hooks calls white supremacist capitalist patriarchy.
Now, those two examples were Anita Sarkeesian, a rather bad feminist, and Ken Ham, a rather dishonest creationist. And in both cases here, I don't want to say that like all feminists are wrong. That's actually incorrect. Only that one has quite a habit of saying things that do not correlate with reality. And same goes for Ken Ham. Like most Christians are totally honest, etc. That guy, though, rather a dishonest fella. And again, like most Christians, totally honest. Most feminists are on the up and up. But if you have a feminist that wants you to look at the world through distorted feminist lenses, and start looking at the world through cultural Marxist a point of view, and start seeing the world as systems of oppression, which the world is not actually made of systems of oppression, but if you really start trying to find some everywhere, you can actually do it. And the same thing if you're asked to see the world through biblical glasses, was the term used. Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to get a distorted view of the world, of reality, and some of the things you're going to think you know are not going to be accurate because you're looking through lenses that like distort your view of reality. So what you want to do is actually the opposite. You want to remove all the goggles and try to see reality as it is. And that's actually very difficult because the human brain, we humans are made to take shortcuts. Our human brains don't like working too hard. They'd rather be fast and efficient. And you do that by taking a lot of shortcuts. And what I mean is that, for example, optical illusions, those are created because we take shortcuts with our brains. Our brains don't actually want to look at everything. We just take a broad picture of everything, and then we fill the rest up in our mind, basically. And that's how optical illusions are created. Because our brains are to be efficient, our brains are just taking shortcuts. And we have shortcuts when we reason as well. And basically, they're flaws in reasoning. They're typically called fallacies or cognitive biases. It's actually, I'm going to link in the description a list of common logical fallacies and a list of common cognitive biases. Just to, you can see there's a lot of them, and they're very common, and we never notice, actually, when we do them most of the time. Most of the time, we very rarely notice that, like, these flaws that we make, and I make, everyone makes. So, and usually other people are pretty good at pointing them out for us, but usually we're not very good at seeing it in ourselves. Now that we see that the media, our parents, teachers, our friends, ourselves, we all make a lot of mistakes when we're relaying information to each other, including myself. Now that we know this, what do we do? Like, what's the next step? Can we fix it? Can I fix? Can I fix? Am I doomed to repeat the mistakes all the time? Am I doomed to permanent ignorance, you ask? Well, no, not necessarily. So the first tip, of course, is realize, like, don't be naive and trusting. Amazingly. Basically, be skeptical. You don't have to be overboard skeptical. You don't have to be, because obviously if you go overboard skeptical and just starts like being skeptical of skepticism, you're just going overboard. Like moderation here, moderation. But it's the idea to question everything, especially if it's a belief that is actually cherished. But the more likely, the more you're going to defend it. And upon pains of irrationality, even possibly, if it's very near to you, like for example, you're going to tend to dismiss a lot of information if it clashes with a cherished belief. For example, I have a tendency to think of myself as a good person, which includes the idea that I am not racist, because racist people are not good people. They're not good persons, and I think of myself as a good person. So I also think of myself as not racist. So if someone tells me, "Hey, you're being racist," my reaction is immediately going to be, "What? No. What are you talking about? No." And I'm not even going to pay attention to whatever point they might have, and perhaps they have a point. Perhaps there's some bias I didn't know of. I don't know. But I can't immediately just dismiss what they're saying just because it clashes with a cherished belief of mine, aka the cherished belief that I am not racist. So basically, I have to actually, if I care about what the truth is, I should evaluate their claim and try to be as neutral about it as possible. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you care about truth, you're probably going to have to do a lot of research. For example, that's tip number 2. Do research. So tip number 1 is like don't be afraid to question everything, even if it's something that's important to you. Question it. If you care about what's true or not, question it. Verify things. Look into it. Even if it's a cherished belief. Number 2 is research, obviously. Don't think things at face value all the time. Now, of course, this requires a lot of work. Basically, you heard me tell the story earlier about myself. Ooh, Wheeler Skeleton Skull. About myself basically researching something Tommy retweeted. And I went and looked into it, read the research, found out that the research actually says something different than what the retweet did claim. That you need to do research to find these things. You actually have to go out and read the studies, which you can find thanks to Google, but you just have to make the effort, take the work. And obviously, at some point, nobody has time to research absolutely everything. So what this means is that we come to tip number 3, and we're going back to philosophy for that one, or the foundations of philosophy, because we're going to take a page out of Socrates' book, and by which I mean, Socrates was big on admitting that he doesn't know as much as he thinks he knows. And that was important. And it actually is an important realization that we don't actually know as much as we think we do. Or at least don't be so certain. Take things as it's probably true, but hey, be open to new data, be open to new evidence. Keep that in mind, that you might not know as much as you think you know, and that will keep you open-minded to receive new information, or for information that might contradict something you thought was true. But it turns out that perhaps maybe it's not as true as you thought it was. So this whole video, this whole video is about knowing things, and I went pretty basic, and I spoke in generalities, pretty much, broad strokes, not in great detail for each example, because the point was not going into detail for each example. That would have been actually too long, because like everything of these topics that I've broached could all be expanded into full-length videos, about 20 minutes of talking about that each of them. But for me, it's important just to give you a quick overview, just an introduction to all these topics, because it's going to leave you better prepared in general to deal with the world, especially since most of my viewing audience is you are in your teens. Like there's a lot of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds that also watch the video, but there's a lot of teenagers. There's a lot of teenagers among you, and you're the ones who are going to be who are going to find this little guide, or this introduction, because I don't want to say it's a guide, but introduction to reconsidering what you think you know, and fact checking and researching and all this stuff that's actually going to be extremely useful. Oh, I don't have any ender pearls. It's going to be very useful for you throughout school when you go to higher education, and you're probably going to have to start questioning things. So basically, if I do end up making more talky videos like this, I want this one to be among the early ones, because this is the video where I tell you, question what I say. And you don't have necessarily to question me, but go verify what I say. use Google, use the internet, and Google what I say, right? Oh, and by the way, when you use Google in an incognito window. Why? Because Google remembers all the things you like. And Google has noticed that people like it when they get sent back things they like at them. People enjoy being in an echo chamber. But being in an echo chamber is exactly what you have to avoid. You have to be exposed to differing points of views. So basically, if you're someone, for example, if you're an anti-feminist, for example, okay, and you Google anti-feminist things on Google, like MRA or whatever, things like that, or feminist pwned, or I don't know, stuff like that nature. If you start Googling that, Google will remember that you've Googled these things. And when you start Googling terms that would be more neutral, and you want, well, is feminist, what is this point about feminist or against feminist? Is that point accurate? Google is going to remember that, for example, you had Googled a lot of things that were anti-feminist in the past, so it's going to prioritize giving you anti-feminist responses first. And then it's going to ultimately bias your entire research and fact-finding mission towards something you already believe. Basically, it's going to keep you inside an echo chamber because Google thinks that's what you want. But you don't want to be inside an echo chamber. You want to be challenged. You want your ideas to be challenged because you want to know if what you think you know is actually true or not, right? So use Google and use it in an incognito window, incognito mode, and that way you're going to get fresh results that are neutral every time, instead of results that are biased, perhaps, towards an opinion you already hold. Okay, so on that final lesson, I think I got to conclude this video because before it gets way too long. But again, I just wanted to impart the basics, if you will, or an introduction, because I barely covered any of the things I talked about. I briefly mentioned them, really, but it's just to give you a taste, and then you can do the research yourself. If you care about whether what you believe is true or not, if you care, you're going to do the research. And if you don't have time to do the research, at least keep in mind that you might be wrong, because you didn't have time to verify. So you might be wrong. Keep that in mind. Even if you did verify, you still might be wrong. But yes, that's the entire thing. That's the whole point. Basically, question everything. Question everything, especially what you hold dear. There you go. That's the final lesson. Whee!